What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Alpha Girl Confidence Podcast. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about how to crush your expectations of perfection. This is a topic that I've talked about with the girls in my program Beyond the Athlete fairly recently. It's something that I'm reading a lot about in a book called What Made Maddie Run. If you're a parent or like an older high school, college athlete, I would highly recommend you reading that. And it talked about a lot, in mental health and, especially with college athletes, specifically and particularly in this example, the reason why so many, student athletes struggle with their mental health, with depression, with anxiety, is because of this expectation of perfection that they put on themselves. And not just that they put on themselves, but also like the expectation that they have to be perfect to get into the right school, right? To make the team, to get the job, to get the internship, to even get accepted into the college you want to get accepted into. So there's just so much in our culture around this, expectation of being perfect that society puts on us, specifically girl athletes, but also that we kind of put on ourselves. And so in today's episode, I want to kind of walk you through, number one, like we're going to be talking about, just like how that's not helpful, how it's unrealistic, but then we'll also get into some ways to kind of like move through that, right? So again, perfectionism. We first have to understand that being perfect is literally impossible. If you play a sport, you cannot be perfect. If you're perfect, then you're not even playing your sport. Let's look at all the different sports, right? Softball. Softball is literally a game of failure. If you succeed 50% of the time, you're one of the best players in the country, right? And so we look at soccer. Are you going to make the right pass all the time in soccer? No. There's change of possession. There's a transition all the time in soccer. Same thing with basketball, right? In volleyball, like if you didn't make a mistake, there would be the longest rallies ever and it would never end. Like sports requires failure. Sports requires mistakes. Without that, like what's the point of even playing? So perfectionism, I want you to completely take that out of your vocabulary because there is no way that you can ever be a perfect human being because human beings are imperfect. And that's the beauty of being a human being. And when you try to be perfect, you limit yourself because when you're trying to be perfect, you're holding back. Like you're not going out there, you're not having fun, you're not doing everything you can because all you're thinking about is I need to look perfect to everybody else. And when you do that, you hold back like I did for so much of my career. You don't have fun, you don't play with confidence, and you're not going to achieve the goals because you're so fearful that I have to be perfect in order to reach the goals, right? So it affects you in that way, but also just the pressure that it puts on you is like this crushing pressure, right? I have to be perfect. If you have an unrealistic expectation of perfection, that's going to put so much pressure on you. It's going to cause so much anxiety, depression, identity crisis, like all these things. So we have to understand the dangers, number one, of perfection. And number two, the fact that you can't be perfect. And when you try to be perfect, number one, you're not being yourself. And number two, you're never going to reach that. Right? It's like you're trying to push a giant boulder up Mount Everest by yourself. It's not going to happen. So we need to learn to change our expectation of perfection. Right? What can we change that to? Instead of expecting yourself to be perfect, what if you just expect yourself to give 100% all the time? And that doesn't mean that your 100% is going to look the same day in and day out. Your 100% one day might be like an 80% of a normal day. So here's an example, right? This is an example I love to give and I like to draw it out. So I'll try to paint the picture here. So imagine that like on your very best day, right? You're 100%, like everything's going well at home. Everything's going well at school. Your energy, like everything is spot on. You're 100%. You can go out and give 100%, right? But let's say that day you started your period or you got in a fight with your friend or you failed a test. Right? If that's the case, you're probably not going to be at 100%, whether that be mentally, physically, emotionally, you're not going to be at 100%. So when you show up to practice that day, your 100%, it's going to be closer to maybe 70, 80%. But can you still give 100% of that 70 to 80%? So even though you don't have it all, can you give all that you have in the tank? And can we shift our expectation from I need to be perfect all the time to no, I just need to go out and I need to try as hard as I can every time, knowing that that's going to look different, knowing that some days are going to be better than others, knowing that you're going to crush it some days and totally stink it up the next day, and not necessarily like being okay with that in the sense of that you don't try to recover from that, but you give yourself grace. And you're kind to yourself and you love yourself even though you weren't perfect. So that's the expectation that I want you to try to shift into, from this perfection to, you know what, I'm good enough. Like no matter what, I'm good enough as a human being and I don't need to prove myself to anyone else. Instead, I just need to go out and I need to work hard and I need to have fun and I need to give everything I have that day. Okay, so that's the shift that we're going to make here. Give me 5 seconds while I let my dog out of my office. All right, hopefully that gave you some time to digest what we've been talking about, okay? So now what we're going to be talking about, I want to get more tangible and talk about, okay, how can we like shift through this perfectionism? Like what are some tangible things that you can actually do on a daily basis to go from this perfectionist mindset to more of this like laid back, still high expectations, but again, more about the effort than the outcome, right? So the number one thing, okay, in order to shift is you have to be willing to make mistakes. You have to be willing to embarrass yourself. You have to be willing to go out there, do it wrong, get feedback. Like you have to be willing to make mistakes. Again, I've said this on probably several podcasts, but my definition of confidence is not that you know how to do everything and that you're sure everything's going to go right all the time. My definition of confidence is that you just have the willingness to try, right? So be willing to make mistakes. If you're willing to make mistakes, you're going to start to chip away at that expectation of perfectionism. And one thing that you can do to actually do that is, number one, like go out and just play and have fun and make mistakes. But number two is like tell yourself this, like out loud. I'm allowed to mess up. I'm allowed to not be perfect. I'm allowed to, give it everything I have and have it still not be my best, right? Like give yourself that permission. No one else is going to give you that permission but you. I can try to give you the permission. That's what I'm trying to do here. But at the end of the day, you have to be the one to give yourself permission to not be perfect. Because here's the thing, no one expects you to be perfect but you. Your parents, I know you think your parents expect you to be perfect, and there may be some parents out there that do, but if parents are listening to this podcast, that's probably not you, right? I guarantee you, your parents do not expect you to be perfect. If you were to go ask them, they probably are going to say, I expect you to just go out and try. Like that's it. So I want you to kind of remove the belief that everyone else expects you to be perfect, because they don't. And what you see on social media, that's going to reinforce I need to be perfect. Well, that's complete garbage, because what you see on social media is not true, is not real, and is not perfect. It may seem perfect, but behind that screen, behind that perfectly cropped, perfectly lighted square photo, there's a lot going on that we don't see. So perfection is nowhere besides nature. But you have to give yourself that permission, okay? And know that other people don't expect you to be perfect, so stop expecting that of yourself. Number two is to just go do it. Like go play. I mean, I already kind of said this one and the being willing to make mistakes, but like just go do it. Go make mistakes. The more you make mistakes, the more you're going to learn. The more you learn, the more you're going to improve. The more you improve, the more confidence you're going to build. Don't think that you have to perform well and always do good to be confident. Instead, use your resilience and your persistence to build confidence. Hey, I was scared to do this. It wasn't perfect, but I did it anyways. That's what I want you to gauge more so and build your confidence off of, instead of the outcome of things, okay? Number three, change your response to mistakes. Okay, so we're just building layer by layer by layer. So once you go out and take action, you just got to change how you respond to mistakes. So instead of, being a jerk to yourself and telling yourself you're not good enough and that you don't belong and that your teammates are going to hate you and be mad at you, you got to change. That's a reaction. We got to learn how to respond to mistakes. Okay, so you have to change your response. Obviously, go get the ball back, go do what you got to do. But you got to shift how you're talking to yourself after you make mistakes and how you play after mistakes. Okay, that's number 3. And number 4 is just persistence. You just got to keep persisting. You got to keep trying. Don't let the mistakes and the quote unquote failures like hold you back. Like the only way to get better is to go through this process, is to be willing to make mistakes, is to go do it, is to change your response, is to keep trying. Like that's how human beings, that's how we evolve and grow. And the more you do this, the more you're going to chip away at that expectation to be perfect, because you're going to see that being perfect does you no good, mentally, physically, or emotionally. If you try to be perfect on the field or the court, you're not going to get better. I promise you that. You're not going to get better. That doesn't mean that you don't have a high expectation for yourself, but instead of the expectation of perfection, we have an expectation of effort, of attitude, of toughness, of focus. That's what we aim to get better and better and better every day. And the perfection is just going to melt away, right? Like I can honestly sit here and tell you that I used to be like, I just wanted to be perfect. And this was a long time ago. I got rid of this perfectionism a while ago, but now it's like, I know I'm going to mess up. I know that these podcasts aren't going to be perfect. I know I'm going to stumble over my words. I know that I'm going to forget what to say. I know that my dog is going to need to go out in the middle of the podcast. I know that I'm going to say the wrong thing, but that doesn't hold me back anymore because I've learned to have a different expectation of myself, to just put my heart into what I'm doing. And if I can put my heart into what I'm doing, then it doesn't matter what the outcome is. So that's what I want you to try to adopt. Is this going to happen overnight? Probably not. Is listening to this podcast going to maybe start to shift some things in you? Absolutely. But until you actually shift this mindset and really like get into and shift your perspective of yourself and your effort and start to go through and be willing to make mistakes and do it and be persistent, until you do that and do the work, it's not going to completely shift. So let this episode and let it come into your bones. Let it come into your heart. Let it shift you and then go out and take action. Okay, so I hope this episode was helpful. I got on some major riffs there and rants there. If you couldn't tell, like I love talking about this stuff. I'm so passionate about it because trying to be perfect is completely unrealistic and really, really dangerous. Okay, and don't let anyone, your parents, your school, your coaches, don't let anyone convince you that you need to be perfect, because you don't and you can't. You're perfect exactly the way you are. So go be you, go try hard, go shift your perspective, and just get out there and have fun. All right, so if this episode is helpful for you, share it with a teammate, share it with a friend. I know you've probably got at least a dozen teammates that this would be beneficial for, and friends, like not just athletes, but this is beneficial for every single human being walking the earth, especially if you're a girl, especially if you're an athlete. So I hope it was helpful. Share it, and I look forward to seeing you on next week's episode. All right, take care.